Welcome back to another episode of The Clever Angle. I'm your host, Tevin McGee. And today we have a very special guest, Andrew Brown. He's a local podcaster here in Jonesboro. And I'm really excited to get to interview him because this is the first time that I've get to sit down with someone that actually edits podcasts. How you doing, Andrew?
Great, man. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, man. So like I said, I feel like this is like an Avengers team up almost because
sure.
It's like, you know, I know a few other people that do podcasts, but no one that I've ever talked to actually edits podcasts and produce other podcasts. So I appreciate you coming on, man.
Oh, for sure. It's exciting because between you and your brother and me, I feel like I'm looking at a mirror as far as our interest, our career paths and things like that. And it's funny to see the doppelganger or the variant version of me in flesh.
Yeah, man. So like I said, thank you for being on the show, man. So if you could just give like a small elevator pitch of who you are and what you do and what your podcasts are, that'd be great.
Oh, for sure, man. I'll start from the beginning. Anyone who meets me and they first hear that my name's Andrew Brown and they see me, they are very confused because I don't look like an Andrew Brown because of growing up Japanese in Arkansas. It doesn't usually correlate. But my dad was in the Air Force. Him and my mom wanted a souvenir from Japan. They adopted me and then bounced around from Missouri to Alaska to New Mexico. My dad retires when I'm 9 and we moved to Bono, Arkansas. I go to Richfield Christian School that time, go to ASU after that. And I really wanted to be either a comic book artist or a history teacher, mainly because of my love for comics and then my love for Indiana Jones was my reasoning. I thought I was going to be a history teacher, but through different paths and stuff, after I graduated college, I got into management. I worked at the movie theater for 9 years, managed there. And then I worked at, different places managing like Gearhead, Finish Line Shoes, and then Dillard's for 6 years. And now I kind of do a jack of all trades at the Trim Gym, which gives me the opportunity to venture out into other hobbies that can revenue money, kind of like photography and podcasting.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. So when you said that you wanted to be like a comic book artist, do you dabble in drawing at all?
I did then, man. I really got obsessed with Batman, like Spider-Man, Batman were my two go-to guys. I of course love the X-Men cartoon that everyone grew up watching on Saturday mornings that you could watch, and then went into really getting to love of drawing of Batman. And it really was, Spider-Man was probably my go-to guy for a lot of it. But the intricate lines of webbing was so tough to try to draw. So I stuck with Batman because it's a lot of blacks and a lot of easy shading, really, is what drawing Batman was like. But I dabbled in that a lot in high school, really to pay attention because I have really bad ADD. Like I know the audience can't see it, but I'm twirling my fingers underneath this desk right now. And so it would help me focus. So I would draw Batman or I would draw like Green Lantern and different things along my paper. And I was really obsessed with anime in high school. So I draw like Vash the Stampede all over my notebooks. And I would draw Goku, of course. And then Vegeta was super easy to draw because it's basically drawing a triangle. So it was a lot of fun just to draw. And I really thought that there was something there. I went to visit Lyon College and they were offering some art scholarships. And I met with a guy who said that I could definitely get in that. But then I just ultimately ended up going to ASU because that's where all my friends went.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But I went 2 years in graphic design, and that's when I switched to history from graphic design. Really wanting to be in the education part of it more than being an artist.
Yeah. So take me to 18-year-old Andrew. You're graduating high school, and did you kind of already have a plan of what you wanted to do?
I thought I was going to be a comic book artist when I graduated high school. I was like, you know what? At the time, the most important comic book movie out was Thomas Jane's The Punisher. It was, and Spider-Man 2 was about to come out. And it was just one of those things where I legitimately thought I was going to be a comic book artist. I went to ASU and I took 1 gen ed class and like 4 graphic design classes.
What did your parents think about that?
They were supportive. Okay. They thought they saw talent there. One of these days, maybe on the I can pull up some of my old drawings, so you can just be like, okay, I see the realm of what you're drawing, and it's very anime themed and very comic book themed. But they were supportive. I mean, they saw a talent there, and they always were very supportive on all three of me, my brother, and my sister on a passion to go for it. But going to ASU, that's what I thought I was going to do, and I had a small niche group of friends from Richfield that I was like, oh, we're going to be tight, and then obviously you go to college and none of you guys are tight from high school for the most part. And it really became my friends. I was working at the movie theater at the time, working about 35 to 40 hours a week. And that's who you end up becoming friends with. Right when I graduated high school, I got promoted to manager. You had to be 18 to manage there at that time. Started managing there. And that's kind of who I became friends with. It was real easy to be like, oh, you skipping class today? I'll skip class with you. So anyways.
So did you end up graduating from ASU?
Yes, sir. I graduated in 2010 with a degree in history.
Okay, so you're graduating from ASU. You got this history degree. You're ready to take on the world. So when you got that degree, did you want to teach history? Like you were
No. I worked at the movie theater so long that I was really tired of high school and college kids that I was like, no, I'm good. And I honestly didn't want to take the education part. So I just said, if I decide I want to teach later, I'll go down the education path at that time.
Yeah. Okay. So what is the rest of what did your life look like then? You decided that you didn't want to do that.
So I didn't want to do that. I was working at the movie theater and I started managing at Gearhead. And the deep dark past of it was I was in a relationship and we were engaged. And so we're getting ready to get married and move to Florida. So in my mind, we were moving to Florida for my ex-wife to be a marine biologist. So I was just like, all right, whatever your career path is, we'll follow that because you have to be by the water, right? So I didn't really focus too much on a career path for me outside of like, well, I have, X amount of years managing at a movie theater, managing at Gearhead. And so I was like, well, with this experience, I'm sure I'll find a job. And then I ended up dabbling in real estate in Florida, managing at a Finish Line, managing at an AT&T store. And then I ultimately ended up at a Dillard's, working my way up through management there. And from there, it was just kind of like building resentment that I was living in Florida, hardly making any friends. And I started putting that resentment on my ex-wife. And long story short, we went through a divorce in 2015 and I moved to Fort Smith, Arkansas to manage at a Dillard's there.
So 2015, when did you end up coming back to Jonesboro?
At the end of 2016, my mom was having a pretty big back surgery. And honestly, it was like a good survival rate and everything like that. But there was like worst case scenario, she wouldn't walk again, different things like that. So I took that as an opportunity to move home. Like I wasn't happy managing at that Dillard's. I wasn't happy living by myself. It was hard for me to make friends. And it was hard to really want to go out. And I was dealing with like financial issues from the move and from going through divorce. And I got into, that's the best shape of my life. I'd work out 6 days a week at a gym over there. And I really wouldn't go out to eat too much. So that was the best shape of my life. But it was just time to move back to Jonesboro to be around family when my mom had that surgery. And it turned out to be the best thing ever as far as moving back.
Yeah. Okay. So, like I said, you do photography, you do podcasts, you do all these things. When did you start to find these passions? Around that time or any time prior, did you ever want to be a podcaster?
So if you were to ask any of my friends that I did talk to around 2015, the end of 2014, 2015, and 16, I would say I'd love to do a podcast for a living. So when I started to kind of get I started to have to travel for work a lot more in Florida because we ended up moving to a farther location away from the Dillard's I worked at. So I drive about an hour each day to go to work. And I would listen to I discovered podcasts during that drive. One of my friends put me on a podcast called How Did This Get Made, which is making fun of movies. Like it's a dumb movie podcast where they talk about terrible movies. And from that, I started listening to it. I'm just like, I'm as funny as these guys. I can be as funny as these guys. Clearly, they're like trained comedians, so I can't be as funny as them. But in my mind, I could. And that got me through my divorce because we were staying in the same house for about 3 months. And not talking to each other and wanting to be, you don't want to be buddy with a woman you're about to divorce. And she likewise. Yeah. So I listened to podcasts with headphones when I was at home. So I didn't really disturb her. And I was in my own little world. And then with photography, I lost my job at Dillard's in 2019. And to help make ends meet, I bought a nice Canon 5D off of the Facebook Marketplace to take on a trip to Montana with my brother and dad. And those photos turned out well, and I was able to sell a few of those just for fun. And it turned into like a career as far as working at the gym and doing photography to kind of make up as income goes. And it just turned into something that I really enjoyed. It's really cool to make. Obviously, a photo is important, and then with social media, it's so important that people identify with you with that. And so I was wanting to do the best to kind of make people look what they didn't see as good. Like they saw themselves in a certain way and be like, no, like here's the photo. Like I did very minimal editing. This is what you look like. This is you. And that was a lot of fun. But podcasting was definitely something that I've always wanted to do. I didn't want to be, what's that syndrome called? Imposter syndrome. Yeah, imposter syndrome. I was just like, there's no way I'm good enough. No one wants to hear my voice. I'm not interested. Like it was all kinds of doubt. And then we can go into, if you want to go into how that career. Okay. Yeah. So the career path started. I think your first guest on season 2 was George Jared.
Yeah,
and that's a mutual friend of ours. We've all met him at the trim gym. He hangs out there more than his own house, I think. But anyways, he's a true crime author, and honestly, true crime is probably at least in the top 3 most used podcast. If not one, it's at least 2 or 3. It's true crime podcasts are everywhere. And he would tell me these stories about being on Hell and Gone and all these other podcasts and documentaries. And if you know George, you think, okay, maybe he's just fabricating. Maybe, I didn't know him. So I'm just like, oh, cool, man. Like, you're just, you're flexing, whatever. I didn't believe him, honestly. And I've told that to him to his face. So I'm not like saying anything new. And then my wife, the love of my life, the wife that's staying here long term, she was my girlfriend at the time. And she was just like, have you heard Hell and Gone? It's about an Arkansas based case. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I listened to it. The second episode, there's his voice. Then the third episode, there's his voice. The fourth, I'm just like, oh, this guy's not lying. And so you Google any kind of murder stories in the past 8 years in Arkansas, he's got an article on it. If you Google it, his name's usually one of the first articles that pops up. I'm like, this guy's not lying to me. So long story short, I asked him to do why he doesn't do a podcast of his own. He's just like, well, never really thought about it, never had time. Fast forward about 6 months later, maybe 5 months later, he calls and just like, I'm ready to do it. Let's sit down and talk. I want you to be the one to produce it. So I discovered this app called YouTube and watched countless hours, it seemed like, of how to produce a podcast and how, I'm not going to say how easy it is because it's not easy, but how if you have a computer, if you're willing to buy the microphones and some kind of device that helps get the recordings that you're making to the computer, whether it be what we're on now or even just a mixer that goes straight into the computer, there's different options. And then using an editing software to plug it all together. It's not that, again, it's not easy, but it's very doable as an amateur.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely thought that when I decided to pick up podcasting that it felt like there's no way I'm going to be on Apple Podcasts. What do you mean? So YouTube was definitely a valuable resource to be able to leverage. What were some of the people that you were looking at on YouTube? I was big into like Pat Flynn and Buzzsprout and all their stuff. So
Buzzsprout was obviously mine, or not obviously, but Buzzsprout was my number one. I mean, they have so many great tutorial videos. And they're all free on YouTube. Like, it's wild that they have so much easy access to it. And they're such a great, that's our hosting site for Diamond State, for Legacy Lowdown, and for the professionals. And they just make it legitimately so easy to your statistics, your actual, it takes under a minute to actually upload your podcast once you have your account set up and everything. It's fantastic. But yeah, they have so many great videos. I wish I knew the guy's name. There's another one who has a bunch of tutorial videos, and it's not necessarily like GarageBand or any of the other editing software tutorials. It's more kind of like how to set up a podcast. Do you want to do a 2 interview? Do you want to do a 2-hander? Do you have a co-host? Do you do it all by yourself? How do you find things interesting to talk about? And it was really cool to listen to him explain all of that. Again, I feel terrible that I don't remember his name, but he was one that I listened to a lot. But as far as the editing goes, that Buzzsprout one, they kind of watch you through it pretty fast. And it's so weird if you have an issue. I'm sure, like, I have 2 dogs. If a dog barks, or if the air conditioner kicks back on, or if a fire truck drives by, it's not that it's again easy, but it's so interesting that the software will help you counteract that. You might not take it out 100% out, but it's so weird. And again, to go between the realm of photography and the realm of podcasting, there is so much technology you have to rely on these days that I was uploading a podcast and my power went out, and you just start scrambling, thinking like, did everything happen? Because like the router kicked off and like, what happened? Now, obviously it was still saved on my computer, but there's that split second of like, well, I can't upload this for another day and a half now, or whenever the internet kicks back in.
And like you said, it's so crazy because especially dealing with audio is the primary thing that you're going to be editing. If a dog barks, like it's happening right now, I'm confident that I'm going to be able to edit that out.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So going from a beginner to kind of being, a little bit more seasoned and knowing those things, it's like, wow, I could have been doing this, a long time ago.
What was your like when you started out, what was like one of your learning situations that you're just like, oh, well, that makes sense, but I wish I would have realized that before starting.
Yeah. I think when I first started, I underestimated how long it was going to take everything to actually get on to the services like Apple Podcasts. So let's say, hey, I'm going to start my podcast. It's coming out on August 11th. there's kind of like a delay when it comes to Apple. So everything was on Spotify and all these other things. But yeah. So there's that little bit of delay that I didn't know about. And most people have iPhones these days. And I was just like, man, like, why am I not getting any downloads? It's because people don't really have Spotify. Yeah. So that was a learning curve. The editing part of it, I pretty much have my system down now, but back then it took me so long to run through the episode, figure out where the ums and the p's and that sort of thing. What about you? What were some of the things that you were struggling with at the beginning?
The first one was I didn't do as much research on microphones as I should have. And I picked up dynamic mics instead of condenser mics like we're using now. Yeah. And what we use on Legacy Lowdown and Diamond State. So the first like 6 episodes of Diamond State, there's not necessarily an echo, but boy, like every now and then those voices really shift because it's picking up both our voices on both microphones. And, or you'll hear like, you'll definitely hear different things in the background a lot more because that dynamic mic's just picking up all this. It's designed, to pick like a guitar strings or sound effects for a movie or voiceovers for movies that are, very animated. And, the first few episodes of Diamond State were real rough to me because I'm like, oh no, I should have researched more. And then, like you said, the letter P, I didn't realize how dangerous that letter was. So let me ask you this. When you hear a criticism, not necessarily it's a bad it's just honest feedback. Does it make you like want to just pull the episode completely or make you want to redo the episode or anything?
See, at the beginning it did. Mm-hmm. At the very beginning, I'm like, no, this sucks. Like, someone said something bad about it. I'm taking the whole thing down. But one thing that I realized is that you can put yourself into action paralysis. Like you just won't act. Yeah. You're just like, man, like there's always going to be something that you're going to be able to fix with it. It's just better to get the content out there, take the feedback and apply it to the next episode and try to stay on task. Because one thing that, especially when you're doing like an interview based podcast that I found is that schedules don't always line up. As you know, we've been trying to do this podcast for 2 or 3 weeks now
since the pandemic.
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
Yeah, since the pandemic, and you can't always rely on things to go just according to plan.
Oh, for sure.
And
I know that you listen to quite a bit of podcasts as well. Like ones that are just that are known for their monetization, like big ones like Rogan and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And what's wild is I'll listen to Smartless, which is one that's Jason Bateman, Will Arnett, and Sean Hayes, and it's professionally produced. And there's still people eating in the background. Yeah. Fat Man Beyond's one of my favorite podcasts, and Kevin Smith's dog barks every other episode. And it's one of those things you just realize, like, you don't think, oh, I'm not going to listen to this anymore because it's garbage because they didn't take the dog's bark out. It's just like, oh, it's almost, if anything, you're like, I know this person a little bit more. They have a dog. Yeah. There's Jason Bateman likes to eat. Oh,
exactly. Cool. But the thing is that you have to realize is Jason Bateman could do that because he's Jason Bateman.
True.
You know what I mean? So like, how are we going to get people to listen to Andrew Brown and Tevin McGee on a podcast? I just feel like I hold myself to a higher standard than the people that are just making it, not necessarily because their content isn't good, but if Robert Downey Jr. comes out with a podcast, he's probably going to have many more downloads than we're going to have just because of his name. So, and
that's what, like with me, my blessing in disguise was George. Like George is definitely, he's, I wouldn't say a local celebrity, but if you delved in West Memphis 3, if you took any interest in the Rebecca Gould murder case, at least over half of the information has been something he's written to most of the media. So having his name attached put it on a higher level for me to be like, oh, his name's important. Like I can't mess up the production side of this. I can't be the weak link in this. And they're like, George, why do you have this guy producing it? And then you hear his dumb dog bark in the back. And so it put me on a new level of what you're kind of saying and piggybacking off his name. And again, I'll tell him that to his face, helped me A, get my name out there a little bit more, but then B, be like, I am very scared to mess this up because I don't want his name to look bad since I'm producing his information.
Yeah. So Diamond State, the birth of Diamond State, you weren't really a true crime fan when you started that.
I was not. And I won't say that I'm still not. I definitely am more interested in it, but it still like gives me the heebie-jeebies, for lack of a better word. And I don't take that lightly to make fun of the fact that true crime is legitimately what its namesake is true crime, actual death and murder or theft or any other kind of crime that happens in Arkansas and the surrounding areas. But George is so good at it. He talks about it he has it every day that he has to bring up something to do with one of the murder cases he talked about. So he's been the guest in all these podcasts where he's the kind of the expert on these murders. And so I was like, why don't you be the one who talks about it weekly? Like, you be the host, and then you get to talk to other people about interest in that case. And again, it took a few months for him to be like, oh, that is definitely something I want to do. And again, it was like, I wanted to produce one. There's a great podcaster, and he does so many different podcasts, and he's really big with Stitcher. He's one of the biggest producers for Stitcher Premium. His name is Matt Gorley, and he produces now Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. He's big on that one, but he produces a James Bond podcast that they just talk about a James Bond movie every week. And he's what got me loving podcasts. And I wanted to be like him and produce and just be the background voice. And so that's what I turned into for Diamond State. But then I do a lot of the co-hosting. Some episodes I don't talk at all because George can talk the whole time. And some episodes I take quite a bit of lead on. But he was the actual hero of mine in the podcast realm. So wanting to produce was more interesting to me. So talking to George and knowing that, like, okay, I'll invest, $200 something to get the Zoom H5, which is the recording mixer to let us get the information to the computer. I'll buy some microphones. If we can take this, and monetization is obviously incredible. If you can do something you like and you get paid for it, that's awesome. But at the same time, like, I learned how to produce a podcast, something that we just talked about, we never thought we could do. Could you imagine that you'd say Tevin McGee on Apple of any kind?
No,
it's
not
insane.
even close. Yeah.
And now, how many do you produce? I know you host too, but how many do you produce?
Yeah. So I've got this one, The Clever Angle. Then I'm a host and producer on the Watch List.
Yeah.
And then my wife's cousins, they do a Razorback podcast, and I helped them out with that one. And then there is a Little Something Positive, which I helped produce that one for my buddy who's lives in New York. And then Killer Personality.
Yeah.
I edit all the episodes for that one.
That's 5?
Yeah.
Yeah. And more than likely you'll probably do more. You have an actual, production company that you with all these podcasts. So if anything, you'll be doing more. And again, we both know it's an avenue. I get on Facebook in the morning and you see a new podcast. Almost just seems like a new business doing some kind of form of podcast. So it's only growing. And, but the whole point of that was the true crime part with George really got my foot in the door to, really begin production. And like we just talked about the hiccups or the different things you learned at the beginning that really scared you. You could either take it down and just be like, you know what, I can't do this, or you persevere and learn from that mistake and you do the next one a little better, We recorded about 6 in about 2 weeks. So those first 6, like I said, I didn't learn any of the mistakes until we started releasing them. Yeah. And again, what's wild on art, and I'm sure, I think George talked about it with his interview with you, but we had a plan of like, there's a big story out of Pocahontas about the Elliott murders. That was going to be our first episode. It's such a terrible story, and it's just something you hope never happens again. And so we were going to talk about it. The week we started producing that one, William Miller got arrested for the Rebecca Gould murder and testified on that. So it turned into updates on that, and that ended up being our first episode, which right now is about at 2,000 downloads, which incredible. Not obviously the subject matter is dark and people want to know information, so that helped. But it was just incredible to know that something that I was so scared to even try to produce turned into something that people did listen to.
Yeah, I mean, that 2,000 downloads for any podcast episode is like incredible. Yeah. So like I said, hats off to you. And that's why I wanted to sit down with you, because just getting your content out there in a consumable way where people actually listen and building it up from the ground. It's difficult. It's difficult. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. It doesn't matter. Like, if you have the best idea, best artwork, and you're the best podcast host, it's going to be difficult to be able to grow a brand new podcast from nothing, especially if you don't have like some kind of name to go on to.
Absolutely.
So how do you plan your episodes?
So that's a great question. George plans the content for the most part. He'll kind of give me a week to 2 week advance of like, here's the cases that I want to lay out for the next time. We've been doing very well being able to get call-in guests or in-person guests to help talk about a lot of our cases. So about every other episode is a guest. So it depends on lining up with them as far as scheduling goes. And then if they have a topic that they're going to talk about that is very important, like a case that they're obviously the expert on, and we're asking them questions about that, I do about 50% research on the case. I do kind of the victims' unfortunate situations of what happened. And then kind of if it's a cold case or if it's a solved case, if the person was executed, if the person is still in jail. And then I kind of let a lot of the details be told by the other people. So I can try to give that, like Crime Junkie or This Is Why We Drink, where they have the person who responds. And it's not necessarily funny, but they are hearing more of a response in real time.
Like the Brit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I try to do that. And, but George is usually the one who plans it. And then we try to play with that 40-minute to an hour mark. And as far as that, we can get into the editing in a minute, but as far as that goes, depending on how that goes is determined on what we're going to edit out.
Yeah. So you said you were like a producer on like the Legacy, right?
Yep. So there's the Legacy Lowdown, and I'm just a producer on that.
Yeah.
I have a mic in front of me. If there's something they miss or if there's a fact check that might need to be made, I will chime in, just because it's so hard to, get information on social media to fact check. So it's kind of nice to have that on during the episode if need be.
Yeah. That's kind of what I was wondering, because I was listening to an episode and then they were like, we're here with producer Andrew, but then I never heard you. So I was like, is he there? Does he have a mic?
It's so tough too. And again, that's one thing that we've had some feedback on, because there's an episode we do with Bo Jones that's real interesting and really good. Bo Jones, if you don't know, is a local artist who just opened.
I know.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So if the audience doesn't know, he just opened his own art studio down on Main Street, which is incredible for his age. And so on that episode, I love talking to artists. I love talking to photographers. I love talking to people who are creative, because in a world we live in, you get that out there through social media. So I wanted to ask him, like photography, if I set up a photo and I'm just like, okay, I set up the background, I put this there, I have a reason this is there, I have a reason that the lighting is darker on one side, I spend an hour setting up the photo just to take a 1-second photo and then edit it for like 30 minutes, it might get like 13 likes on social media. I post a photo of, say my wife and me, or I post a photo of like someone at the gym who's like not scantily clad, but in like a more revealing outfit.
Yeah.
It'll get like 75 to 100 likes, right? And so I was asking him if he was able to gauge his social media presence. Is that how he sees value in his art? Or if he can see value in his art and the time he put in there? Or if he only gets like 18 likes on this painting he did, does he see less value in his in his artwork? And he loved the question. He answered such an honest question. And, but then a bunch of people texted Tyler, and Katie was just like, who's the guy who asked that question? Why was he not? Who is that? Like, there's a random voice that's on there that we don't know who it is.
Yeah.
And so we have issues of like remembering to introduce me and not remember to introduce me. So I've kind of done my best just not to speak unless it's, something that I can add value. That's more or less a fact check than a question. But it's still a kink we're working on.
So have you ever been on a podcast have you ever been interviewed on a podcast before?
This is my first.
This is your first one. Okay. I honestly, I can't tell.
Can I tell the audience that this is our second, but we had such a hiccup on our first time we interviewed.
Yeah.
So this is our second, but my first.
Yeah.
Still.
We tried to do this.
It's like Christmas time.
It was a while ago. We've been trying to get this together, but yeah, you brought up an interesting point. I actually wrote that down because the social media aspect of promoting stuff, I'm still not the best at. How do you leverage social media, and have you seen an increase in the amount of downloads or feedback or, people putting it on their story from social media accounts?
We have a few fans. I'm actually fortunate that you're one of them. You do a lot of sharing for us, for sure. And we do have a few people that share. We definitely try to release an episode of some kind every Friday. So we'll try to correspond a post with that. And then we'll try to do a follow-up post Sunday or Monday, kind of about a previous episode. We've noticed if, for example, an episode's not getting as many downloads, say it's not as important of a case to people or not as interesting of a case, we try to promote that more just to get its name out there, to kind of be like, this is what happened. You really want to listen to this one. And so we try our best to kind of keep up with that. Lately, it's been a little bit tougher. And that's not my fault. It's honestly lack of taking too many projects at one time. But we average about 8 to 10 likes, I think, on a social media post. Every now and then we'll have one that's like 15, 20. but we want to advertise, but I again try to turn my brain off of it. If they only got so many posts, does it, I'm still seeing the so many downloads, so it's still getting downloaded. But as far as the photography side of it go, oh man, I take it way too personally. Like 7 times I'm just like, oh no, I'm not a good photographer. What am I doing?
Yeah.
It only got so many likes again. And you can't help but like in Jonesboro, we do have large amounts of photographers. For example, your wife and your brother are both very, very big photographers that are well known for their photography in Jonesboro. And so you happen to, you want to follow each other. You want to be able to support each other. But then you also see like, oh no, like he got like 57 likes on that photo and I only got 46 on mine. Like maybe he is better than me. Like, you know what I mean? Again, it has nothing to do with it. It really doesn't. And I should know that. But there's moments of like jealousy that I'm just like, I suck at this. I just need to sell my camera because they're getting more likes than me.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% get that. And, a lot of it's not anything that you did or you didn't do. Like the Instagram algorithm is just an absolute beast, like, because I have my personal page, the watch list page I have access to, Natural State Media page, and then the Clever Angle page. And I'll see, like, even if, let's say I post something on my personal page and I'll flip over to one of my other pages, it won't even show up.
So, wow.
Yeah. So, like, I'll have to go search for it. I'm like, okay. It's probably not even showing up on some people's timeline because apparently, like, if you post something, it's going to show it to 10% of your followers.
Yeah.
And if they don't interact with that post, then it's not going to show it to them again. So
it's so wild, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, I try to be as active on social media as possible, but as you said earlier, taking on more projects, I've noticed that I just need more hands. You get a lot of downloads on your podcast, so I was just curious what your social media aspect was like. So,
again, it takes, like you said, the algorithm, and I 100% don't completely understand the algorithm, but there's stuff that I wish I knew more of. But with, for example, Diamond State Murder Board. Now, most true crime demographics, and this is going to sound sexist, and I don't mean it to be, but as you know, like a middle-aged female demographic, as far as if you look at a lot of now it's more than that, but if you look at the main percentage, it's that. And they're usually the ones who are on Facebook at the right time for us to be posting in the morning. Because I try to post between 7 to 10 in the morning on that Friday of our new episode. So we have a lot of people sharing on Facebook in that demographic. Instagram, I got maybe like you, and there's a few others that might share it to their story. That's the only way to really share on Instagram. So we're not getting as many shares and views and likes on Instagram than we do on Facebook because of the demographic as well. And again, I don't mean that to sound sexist, but it's just how the numbers align up on that. But with Legacy Lowdown, I'm very privileged because our co-host is part owner and part creative content creator for the Polish agency. And so they handle our social media for the Legacy Lowdown. So they have algorithms and they boost certain episodes and boost certain times of the week. And since their job is algorithms and doing social media marketing for multiple businesses here in Jonesboro, Arkansas, they understand that. So they handle all that one. And then the professionals, I piggyback off of Diamond State while we're on a hiatus.
Yeah, for sure. The professionals is great, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I love listening to your takes on different movies and bringing in the professionals, and that's something that we talked about over Christmas that you were, thinking about doing, and now seeing it come to fruition. It's great to see
that's awesome.
An idea come to life. So,
thank you.
Kudos to you on that. So, you have a weekly podcast. I have a weekly podcast. What are some of your time hacks? Like, how do you save time with like editing and getting episodes out? Because one thing that I really struggle with is like this episode right now, it's coming out Thursday.
Yeah.
I haven't had time to go and build my caseload up. I've got an interview today and I've got one Thursday. How do you stay ahead of your due date of getting episodes out?
That's a great question for anyone who is creative. And the thing was I learned from George when we started Diamond State to have like 4 in the can. So I try to have at least for professionals right now, I try to have 2 ahead of release. So I have another one in the can that I could release but I would rather, we're about to record one as well. I don't know the audience.
Yeah.
We're about to record one because we've been wanting to talk about certain projects. And so we get to talk about that next on the professionals. So yours will be out on Friday, but I have another one that came for next week. If I don't, for example, get a chance to meet with anybody else, I try to keep 1 in safety. George tried to keep us with 4 in safety, which was incredible. But the one thing I've realized, and you've probably noticed this too on guests, is sometimes it's just hard to connect. People want to do it, and it's just timing really doesn't line up on either part, me or the guest. And some people who I knew would be incredible for this project legitimately don't want to be recorded talking, which again, I respect. I totally understand. It is nerve-wracking and a little scary to put yourself out there on a recording. So it's tough to find guests. So that's what I try to do, is keep 1 or 2 in the can as far as episodes released. Now, the editing side of it, like you said, starts off real scary and it takes you way too much time. And then I've been able to boil it down to almost the time of the episode at length. I try my best to listen through it to hear, every now and then there's some table hits, because if a microphone's on the table, you just can't take it out. You try your best, but you can muffle it, but you can't take it 100% out. One of our episodes of Legacy Lowdown, they brought a canteen trying to advertise for the new brewery coming, and you just hear that thing glug, 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 glug all over. You can muffle it where it doesn't hurt the person's ears, but it's still in there.
Yeah.
But I try to, I don't usually end up having to spend more time than the episode's length now. And it's just learning little hacks, learning that noise gate filter. And then really, I take a lot of notes when I record if it's multiple people. So that way I have a timestamp of, okay, someone hit the table at this time. The air conditioner kicked on at this time. So when I play through it, I can be like, okay, I'm going to do everything I can to edit that noise out, but you or at least muffle it down.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you balance your passion projects, photography and podcasting with your at home?
I'll tell you mine, but honestly, I should be asking you that question. You're a father of 2 lovely girls. You're a loving husband. And I don't think you give yourself enough credit on social media. Like when you post on your social media, it's about your family, which is amazing. Like you care so much about your family that's what you post the most about. And you can tell that you're a family man, you're a father and a husband. So that's incredible. So I honestly should be asking you how to be a better time management person with passion projects in home. But for me, I have a very understanding and loving wife. She was the one who supported me in podcasting even before I met George. She said, you should do it about movies. You won't shut up about the facts of movies. You should talk about facts of movies or anything like that. And then from there, it really turns into just my job. I try to manage with my new schedule at work. I'm able to do so much at home when my wife's at work. And the only person I have, or the only other thing, is 2 dogs and 3 cats. So cats, they can do whatever they want. They're cats. But the 2 dogs, I try to, there's a really cheesy but true motto, is just like a dog's whole life is you're their whole life. So I try to give them so much attention. But if I can get them into a mile walk, I have about 2 hours to edit. And a lot of times I can listen to the podcast while editing photos. So that's nice. Trying to play through the whole episode to hear it while I'm editing photos. And that's where a lot of my time is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. And there's obviously certain projects photography wise that you really need to 100% not listen to anything. But there's some, like for the gym and stuff, that I can kind of do both at the same time.
No, that's awesome. That's something that me and E were talking about. When you have time to do both. But I mean, it makes sense.
Yeah. And also a key, this is such a dumb trick, but I promise you, anybody who's a home business, who runs work from home, don't get in comfy clothes. Like if I come home from working at the gym, it's goofy khaki shorts and a t-shirt and some shoes. I don't take those off until I know that I'm done editing, for at least, if I do my editing right when I get home from work, because that helps me not get relaxed. Like if I get relaxed on a couch and try to edit on my laptop in front of my TV or on the couch, I'm either going to fall asleep or I'm only giving half my time to it. And that's not fair to the person who's paying me to work on their podcast or work on their photos. So staying dressed to work and sitting at a desk has been a lot to help me, especially if my wife is at work.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like a psychological hack.
Absolutely. Well, again, like, I hope you don't mind me sharing this, but like we've had like 2 weeks of trying to plan things, and everything that's come up has been with your daughter. So 100% respect that. That's your first job. And I know it's not a job to you, but it's the first thing that you have to care about. So I totally respect that your time is your family's time first and foremost. Yeah,
for sure. I appreciate that. So did you find it easy or difficult to get people that already knew you as Andrew, the photographer, to take you seriously as a podcaster?
Dude, that is the best question that anyone's asked me about this podcasting thing, because it's 100% right. Most of my friends, like close friends, don't listen. And I totally understand it. I do, because anything I would tell them, I've already told them in person, or anything that George has told them. We have such closeness friends that they have heard it from him as well. So I try to just not take it personally. Obviously they support, so they'll share anything. And every now and then, like, they will listen. Like, my wife still listens and George's wife still listens, even though they've heard everything. But I understand friends who don't want to listen to me ramble about a movie or George ramble about a case. And so I totally get where they're coming from. But they're so supportive and so understanding of, like, wow, he's doing something he's dreamed about. That's incredible to say that he's doing. But again, I know that a lot of them don't listen, and I don't take it personally. And then the photography, they're very supportive of that. I love it when someone tells me, like, oh, you made that way too contrast, or you've overly texturized this girl's skin. You've taken things that, you know, I love criticism. Obviously, you hope that there is none, but I'd rather you be honest with me than coddle me. Like, I would rather you be like, hey, man, like, that photo, there's way too, her lips are fake looking, her skin's plasticky, as opposed to, hey, you do great, man. You do great. Because you think about American Idol. Everyone hated Simon Cowell, right? He's a jerk because he tells the truth. Like, I'm not saying be mean on live television. Don't make me cry because you hate my artwork. But if there's something flawed, I would rather you tell me as my friend and let me know, hey, like, this is what we think of as good photography, or this is at least for that model. I'm not saying, I know that art's subjective, but if that model didn't show as much as this one, then please, you know, tell me. That'd be great.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that it's been very difficult to, you know, put something out there and then, you know, have people that are close to you not listen. I kind of do take it personally because I'm like, how am I going to get strangers to listen to my stuff, people that I don't know, if I can't get my close-knit circle to do it? So it's definitely something I've struggled with, and, you know, it's gotten better. That's why, like, if I ever see any of my friends, you know, I'm going to share Diamond State stuff. Yeah. I'm going to like all your posts. I'm going to like all of these posts because that's the kind of friend that I would want. You know, absolutely. Like, I want to be there. Like, if you're doing something and you're unsure about it, I'm going to be right there to reaffirm you that, you know, I'm listening to your episodes. I'm giving you a 5-star review. It's just been trying to find that balance of getting new listeners to listen, you know, getting them to get to know who you are, and changing the perception of people that already know you as one thing. So yeah, I mean, that's a good answer, because I mean, it's similar to the experience that I've gone through.
But it is wild because, like, I think my biggest thing too is trying to, for example, The Professionals, which is a movie-based podcast. I don't expect people to love my voice, you know, because I hate my voice. I'm sure everyone who records themselves deals with that. But if I can get one person to to care about a Jake Gyllenhaal movie, because we've done like 5 in a row, or one person to be like, you know what, I thought Speed Racer was a stupid kids movie, but I'll give it a chance. And if I get one, I've gotten one text so far that said, I've never even heard of Love and Other Drugs. I just watched it. That was a good movie. Like, that's the type of stuff that I want, is to make someone have an itch to be like, you know what, I want to watch a movie, because it is such a great pastime. It can be a time waster where there might be more important things you can work on, but to be able to unwind and live in a fantasy realm and really get to see something different, or see something that's realistic, that you're like, well, even though it's a movie, I understand that take on that. Maybe I can live my life a little more like that, just to make someone else feel better about themselves. That's a great feeling. Yeah.
I mean, movies is definitely a great form of escapism. And I think everyone needs that unwind. Everyone needs that peace to be able to, okay, I'm relaxed. You know, I'm able to just fully give myself to this movie or TV show or wherever it is, because life is hard and life is stressful. And, you know, we're not in 6th grade getting to popsicles and recess anymore. You know, we've got bills and responsibilities, and it's good to just be able to disconnect and fully give yourself to these characters and really get invested. Like, I watched so many good movies this weekend. Going back to my kids, I've never seen the movie Up. So
you've never seen Up?
I've never seen Up. So, like, I watched all of the original, like, Disney and Pixar movies, and, you know, that's what I grew up on.
Yeah.
But, you know, after 14, 15, I never watched any animated movies. So now we're watching a lot of Disney Plus with the kids and stuff. So I was like, you know what? I've never seen Up. Such a good movie.
Do you have tissues ready in first 10 minutes?
I literally cried, bro. Like, when so many times during that movie, I just got teary eyed. Like, you know, 1, having kids, 2, you know, he gives the Ellie badge at the end, And she tells him to go have an adventure in the book. I'm like, dude, this is not a kid's movie, but it's phenomenal.
If you go back and watch it again, maybe you've already read this, but if you go back and watch it again, because I saw it, I worked at the movie theater when it came out. We previewed it, meaning we watched it before to make sure the quality of the hard drive was good. And then we actually promoted it where we made a giant house with balloons, and we had a big event with the Humane Society because there's a lot of dogs in the movie. So I watched it like 3 times in the theaters in the span of 2 days. And the second time I watched it, if you watch the beginning, knowing the end, and you see her in the hospital room laid up, if you look on her on the end table next to her hospital bed, Ellie's as an old lady, she's got all the Scotch tape scissors and the book sitting there, meaning that her last thing she did before dying was working on that book for him. It's heartbreaking, man. Like, it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah. It was an incredible movie, man. And like I said, I've got a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they like the dog in the movie and the balloons and stuff, but they didn't really get like the message of the movie. So I watched that, and I watched Cars for the first time, and I'm really enjoying a good movie.
Even Cars, man. Cars is like it's Rocky. You know what I mean? It's kind of it's a sports movie. Like, it's what's crazy is you take the fact that they're cars and you just make them drivers, real life drivers. That's a real movie right there. That's a real story.
Yeah. So, but I definitely think there's value in watching a good movie. But so one thing that I wanted to talk to you about while I've got you here is monetization. So, how did you go about getting your podcast monetized, and like, what did that look like for you?
So, I don't know if I'm allowed to go into numbers, but I'll go into the specifics of how it all happened. That we dropped our first episode back in December of 2020, and it was about the Rebecca Gold murder case, and it was everything that had to do with William Miller being on social media, his presence on social media during the investigation of her murder over the past 2 years after Helen gone. And so after that first episode dropped, we went ahead and had an email created and social media created, and a local company here, Legacy Insurance, actually contacted us about wanting to be a sponsor and being like, you know what, we see value in podcasts. We know more people don't. Yeah. So he actually reached out to us, and then from there, it turned into me producing their podcast, the Legacy Lowdown. So they're coincided. But that's kind of how it happened, was really getting a chance to being sponsored by someone who saw value in how people are turning to podcasts, and knowing that if we're dropping a weekly episode to get their businesses out there. So we have more plans for some sponsorships in season 2. As far as monetization goes too, we're looking at doing a Patreon page. I don't think George will mind talking about that, but we're going to probably have a Patreon page. And what that page is going to look like is some case information that will go on. Some of it will coincide with episodes we're doing where there'll be more information about the case, or some of it will also be cases that just won't be on the normal feed. So we'll probably be looking at having a larger amount of recordings over the next year, but monetizing a Patreon page. And then we're actually going to finally do merchandise. We've talked about it through different episodes, but we finally have a shirt design made and coffee mugs and stuff like that. So we'll have access for that as well for just to basically pay for newer equipment and things like that. It's not necessarily like a cash grab. I know a lot of people frown upon true crime podcast having any form of monetization, but it's more or less to be able to pay for our travel and stuff. We'll more than likely have a panel at CrimeCon in Vegas of 2022, and just to help pay for that type of stuff.
That's incredible, man. So what is some advice to someone like me that would want to get some kind of sponsorship or monetization? Because, I'm in the position now that I want this to be more than just an expensive hobby.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So what's some advice you would give to somebody that wants to monetize their podcast?
Just reach out, man. I'm sure if like with photography, you do a few free photos for people. I know that me and E could go on hours about different people that we've done photos for free for and stuff like that. And really just start showing that you have value in your artwork, if it's podcasting, photography, drawings, commissions, whatever it might be. And then just, pick somebody, even if it's just like we, piggyback off each other's podcast, where you cut a 30-second commercial for me, I cut a 30-second commercial for you. Yeah. Then it shows that you have pedigree, that you have an advertiser. They don't have to know that you and me are just, piggybacking on each other's advertisings, but it shows that you know how to integrate a commercial inside your episode. From there, you say, hey, I do a commercial for the professionals, and it's reached more downloads since we started doing this. Then you're able to present that to investors. So if you want to go to a local business, say it's a roofing company, say it's like a TJ's Burger, something like that. That's a new restaurant or something that's locally owned. And you present a plan of how many episodes you'll be playing. The fact that those episodes are never going anywhere unless you cancel your Buzzsprout account, like they're always going to be up. So even season 1 of Diamond State will still be up while we're recording season 2. So a commercial is going to stay there long term. You get one more listener, they're probably going to go back and listen to at least one more episode from the previous season. And from there, you have value showing like people are listening to this for free and they're hearing your name as a sponsor. And then it's just you setting your price on like, I think we have like 5 episode contracts, 10 episode contracts, then full season contracts. And it's just whatever you want to do with that contract and show value in why adding commercial. Even if it's like I said, you produce 5 podcasts, just start integrating commercials from each podcast into your own podcast. You have all the stats right there. You could print off to show like, this is what happens when you do that synergy of advertising, and then you present that to an investor or a business in the local area.
Dude, that's incredible. I mean, that's one of the main things that I wanted from this. I've learned so much just sitting down with another podcaster, and I really appreciate you doing this, man.
Yeah, man. Likewise, dude. I appreciate you and your time.
Yeah. So how do you balance like wants and needs when it comes to like gear and stuff for your podcast? Because I know with photography, there's always a new lens, there's always a more expensive mic, a more expensive recorder. I eventually want to add video to my podcast. I did an episode last week where I interviewed a guy that has a videography company, and he actually shot the whole thing for free and, sent me some of the clips of it. I'm like, man, this would be really cool to be able to get out there. How do you balance like what you want and what you functionally need?
I've lucked out. I mean, we can go back and talk about when we were getting into this, you and me talked quite a bit because you started a little bit before me on the podcast realm. So I was asking you a lot of equipment advice, and really it was just a very much God-given not challenges, but God-given opportunities. I went to a local pawn shop to see if they even had a cheap Yeti microphone. And they ended up having the Zoom H5 for like $140. And then I got on Amazon to order the microphones. And from there, it turned, pretty easy. Because normally that Zoom H5 is like $220 or right one at $99. So it was, quite a bit cheaper. And just knowing that's what I needed. Until with the podcasting realm, if it's not broke, I don't need to fix it. So my whole thing,
for sure.
Like you and me now have the same microphones because I took your advice and they work perfectly fine. The phone call stuff through the Zoom H5 is incredible. Like it sounds like they really are there. So as far as the wants versus needs for gear, I haven't seen anything that really made a difference to me as far as getting new gear like photography would, where I just, I hear that a certain photographer got a different lens and I'm like, well, now I need that lens or whatever. So the want and gear need, the main thing was getting a faster processor. I ended up with my previous tax return biting the bullet and getting a new laptop. And if anything, the laptop was the gear that I'm like, having 32 gigs of RAM versus my 16 did make a difference, like that type of stuff. But now that I have that for photography and podcasting, it's gold. My biggest thing now is like having to buy external hard drives because it's so much space with photos and video and podcast audio files. And now I'm learning that you're supposed to use this Zoom H5 to record the voiceover work for a video, plug that into the editing software, and then putting that on top. And I'm like, so that's 7 files now going into this one video. Yeah. So hard drives are the main gear that I kind of been having to purchase lately.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man. This is.
Do you see your stuff needing things? Like, is there certain gear that you're like, man, I really do wish I had a better mic or a better setup?
I'm more like you. Like, if the audio sounds good, the only thing that would probably make it sound better is like just being in a studio. But as far as like the equipment, I'm cool with these $50 mics. I mean, I've got 5 of them at this point. Yeah. So I've got an H6 recorder. So to me, I'm cool with using this. It's portable. I like my setup where it's at. Like I said, thank you for taking the time to sit down with me. Is there anything that you want to plug before we wrap the episode up?
Oh, for sure, man. The main things are just, we kind of talked about them, but I do produce 3 podcasts. Diamond State Murder Board Season 1's available on Spotify and Apple. And then it's on a hiatus. It'll come back in September with new episodes and new cases. I'm currently doing the professionals during its hiatus. So right now we ran through 5 Jake Gyllenhaal movies, and I talked to different people about the career in the movie portrayed. So example, the last episode we did was End of Watch with a rookie police officer who's been on the force for 1 year. And he went through the breakdowns of being an officer in Arkansas versus LA, body cams, being a police officer during the Black Lives Matter movement of 2020, and understanding like the importance of officers versus the fact there is cruelty and there is inhumanity in certain officers. And then the Legacy Lowdown is the other podcast that I produce. And it's really cool because it's like take Occasions magazine in audio form. It's getting to know a business leader or somebody who's helped the community or somebody who's starting to help the community in Jonesboro and getting to pick their brain about why Jonesboro is important to them. So those 3 podcasts are on Apple and Spotify, and they're all completely different types of podcasts, but they all are very interesting, and I'm very proud to be a part of them.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to have all of the things that Andrew just mentioned, all of his podcasts, all his passion projects. We'll have the link to his photography if you want to check that out in the show notes. This has been another episode of the Clever Angle Podcast. Andrew, thank you again, sir.
Thank you, my friend.
Until next time, peace.